A global power shift is already in motion, but no one is paying attention. While the world watches politics and economics, China is quietly rewriting the rules of military dominance. Hypersonic missiles that evade defenses. Warships designed to control the Pacific. Airfields being fortified for something bigger. The Pentagon sees it. But do you? This isn't speculation. It's already happening. The U.S. is scrambling to counter China's rise, reopening World War II-era airfields, reinforcing bases, and reworking its entire military strategy. Because the question isn't if conflict is coming, it's how soon. Most will only realize what's happening when it's too late. But you'll see it first. There's a reason history keeps repeating itself. Strategic locations never lose their importance. The United States is reviving airfields from World War II, like Northfield on Tinian Island, as part of a broader military strategy in the Pacific. These forgotten airfields, once staging grounds for historic operations, are being repurposed to counter China's rapidly expanding military presence. With the Pacific turning into a chessboard of power moves, these old runways are becoming vital assets once again. Why bring back airfields that have been dormant for decades? It's all about flexibility. Large, centralized bases are easy targets for China's missile capabilities, but a network of smaller, scattered airfields makes it much harder to cripple American air power. The military is betting on mobility, ensuring forces can relocate swiftly, adapt to threats, and remain unpredictable. These airfields, hidden in plain sight, are now pieces of a grander strategy, one designed to keep adversaries guessing. China's growing presence in the Pacific is pushing the U.S. to rethink its military footprint. The People's Liberation Army, PLA, has been ramping up naval operations, fortifying artificial islands, and deploying missile systems capable of striking distant targets. By reopening these airfields, the U.S. isn't just preserving history. It's making a calculated move to maintain air superiority. With China's defense strategy centered around rapid strikes, the ability to operate from multiple locations is becoming a matter of survival. But this is just the beginning. Rebuilding old airfields is only one part of a larger, more intricate strategy that's reshaping military dynamics in the Pacific. The U.S. isn't just focused on where its forces are based. It's also shifting how they operate. Instead of relying on massive, vulnerable installations, it's embracing a new method of deployment that ensures resilience. This brings us to something called the hub-and-spoke strategy, a game-changing approach designed to make American forces harder to target and easier to mobilize. Want to stay ahead of the curve and uncover the real strategies shaping global power? Then make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, because what's coming next is something most people will never hear about. The kind of knowledge that separates the informed from the unaware. Don't be the last to know. Let's talk about military evolution. The U.S. is moving away from the outdated reliance on massive, centralized bases and embracing the hub-and-spoke strategy. Imagine a spiderweb of smaller, scattered bases across the Pacific, each capable of supporting operations without being a sitting duck for enemy missiles. This decentralized approach forces adversaries to spread their attacks, making it far more difficult to deliver a knockout blow. Meanwhile, China's missile capabilities have grown to the point where large bases like Guam are no longer the fortresses they once were. The DF-26, ominously nicknamed the Guam Killer, can strike from thousands of miles away. A single, well-placed strike could neutralize key American forces before they even have a chance to respond. That's where this strategy comes in. By spreading forces across multiple locations, the U.S. ensures no single attack can cripple its operations. At the same time, the spokes of this strategy aren't just airfields. They're a mix of runways, logistics hubs, and supply depots hidden across islands and territories throughout the Pacific. Aircraft can take off from one location, refuel at another, and strike from a third. This unpredictability forces China's military planners into a constant guessing game, making their carefully calculated missile strikes much less effective. In war, the side that dictates the battlefield's terms usually wins. More importantly, the stakes have never been higher. Taiwan, the South China Sea, and key shipping lanes all factor into this evolving game of military chess. The U.S. isn't just making small adjustments. It's preparing for the next phase of power projection in the Pacific. But here's the real question. How is China responding? Because if history teaches us anything, it's that no superpower sits back and watches its rival gain the upper hand. Now, let's dive deeper into the heart of the matter. China is expanding its military capabilities at an alarming rate, and it's not just the sheer number of warships being built, it's the strategy behind them. With a focus on missile-capable destroyers and amphibious assault barges, China is aiming to dominate the waters near Taiwan and beyond. Satellite imagery has shown a fleet in the making, one that could shift the balance of power across the Pacific. In addition, Beijing's naval expansion isn't happening in isolation. New technologies are being integrated at a rapid pace, enhancing their warships' capabilities to detect, target, and strike from a distance. The proximity of these naval assets to key areas like Taiwan underscores a strategy that's as much about intimidation as it is about preparation. Each new vessel launch signals a step closer to a military capable of projecting power far beyond its shores. Meanwhile, the presence of amphibious barges and expanded missile systems suggests that China is positioning itself for swift, decisive actions. These developments aren't just theoretical. They're practical maneuvers that put nearby territories at risk, challenging the status quo in the Pacific. It's a game of brinkmanship, where every new ship and missile can be seen as a chess piece, strategically placed to keep opponents off balance. And this is where the stakes get even higher. The ripple effects of China's military buildup are felt well beyond its immediate neighbors. As tensions rise, the question isn't just how prepared the U.S. is, but how the entire Pacific region is reacting to these shifts. Want to stay ahead of these developments and uncover the strategies that could redefine global power? Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, because understanding these moves could be the key to predicting the next major shift in global military power. Don't miss out. Let's get to the core of the tension. Taiwan isn't just another island. It's a geopolitical time bomb, and both the U.S. and China know it. Sitting at the crossroads of major Pacific trade routes and military strategies, Taiwan represents more than just a political dispute. It's a potential ignition point for a global conflict. For the U.S., defending Taiwan is about maintaining control in the Pacific. For China, reunification, by force if necessary, is a non-negotiable objective. Meanwhile, military exercises in the region tell a story of preparation on both sides. China's naval forces conduct aggressive drills simulating blockades, while the U.S. continues to send warships through the Taiwan Strait as a show of force. The message is clear: neither side is backing down. With advanced missile systems in place and aircraft carriers in constant motion, the Pacific isn't just a theater of competition. It's a pressure cooker with rising stakes. At the same time, Taiwan's own defense forces are being modernized, with U.S. military aid and training increasing year after year. Airfields, coastal defenses, and missile systems are all being strengthened to make any potential invasion as costly as possible for Beijing. The U.S. sees Taiwan as more than just an ally. It's a strategic line in the sand that, if crossed, could pull the entire region into chaos. A conflict here wouldn't just be local. It would be felt across the world. And here's where things get even more complicated. A battle for Taiwan wouldn't stay confined to the island. It would ripple across the Pacific, drawing in U.S. bases, regional allies, and global economic forces. The bigger question isn't if China is ready to act. It's whether the rest of the world is prepared for what comes next. Because as tensions build, the next phase of this military chess game is already in motion. Here's where things get even more intense. China has been developing some of the most advanced missile systems in the world, and they aren't just for show. Weapons like the DF-26, nicknamed the Guam Killer, are designed specifically to target U.S. military bases deep in the Pacific. With a range of over 3,000 miles, this missile can strike key airfields and defense hubs before American forces even have time to react. The message is clear. China is preparing for a fight where distance is no longer a safety net. Meanwhile, the introduction of hypersonic missiles like the DF-17 adds another layer of complexity. These weapons don't follow traditional flight paths, making them incredibly difficult to intercept with existing missile defense systems. Traveling at speeds exceeding Mach 5, the DF-17 can evade radars and deliver precision strikes, potentially neutralizing high-value targets in minutes. The U.S. military isn't just worried about range anymore. It's about speed, unpredictability, and sheer destructive power. At the same time, China has been mass-producing anti-ship ballistic missiles capable of crippling aircraft carriers. These weapons are designed to challenge U.S. naval supremacy, making large-scale deployments in the Pacific increasingly risky. If these missile systems work as intended, they could push American forces further back, creating a defensive bubble that China controls. The balance of power in the Pacific is shifting, and every new missile test reinforces that reality. And here's what makes it even more concerning. These advancements aren't happening in isolation. China's missile strategy is deeply integrated with its naval expansion, cyber warfare capabilities, and satellite systems, creating a multi-layered approach to modern warfare. The question now isn't just what China is capable of, but how soon these weapons will be put to the test. Because if history has taught us anything, it's that military buildups never happen without a reason. The U.S. isn't just watching China's military rise. It's building a fortress in the Pacific. Bases in Guam, the Philippines, and Australia are undergoing major upgrades, transforming them into highly defended, rapidly deployable military hubs. This isn't just reinforcement. It's about ensuring the U.S. can strike back instantly if tensions escalate. Every runway, bunker, and missile defense system being installed is a direct response to China's growing firepower. Guam is the front line. The U.S. is turning it into a fortified stronghold with cutting-edge missile defenses, hardened airfields, and underground storage for critical supplies. The goal? To withstand a first strike and keep operations running no matter what. China's DF-26 might be called the Guam killer, but the U.S. is making sure Guam won't go down easy. Meanwhile, the Philippines is back in the game. After years of strained relations, the U.S. now has access to key bases near the South China Sea, a direct challenge to China's expansion. Over in Australia, air bases are being expanded and military drills with U.S. forces are increasing. These moves aren't just about defense. They're about making sure China knows the U.S. isn't backing down. But not everyone is on board. Political resistance and environmental concerns are starting to push back against this expansion. Some Pacific nations are wary of becoming staging grounds for a U.S.-China showdown. And that raises a big question. Is military strength enough when diplomacy is shifting beneath the surface? Because in this game, alliances matter just as much as firepower. Military might mean nothing without support. The U.S. is expanding its Pacific presence, but not every nation is on board. Many remember past colonial rule and don't want their lands turned into battlegrounds. Some leaders see U.S. bases as protection. Others see them as a magnet for conflict. The bigger question? How long will these alliances hold under pressure? Meanwhile, China isn't just flexing military power, it's buying influence. Billions in infrastructure deals, trade partnerships, and diplomatic favors have pulled many Pacific nations into Beijing's orbit. Some governments are hesitant to back the U.S. too strongly, fearing economic retaliation. Missiles win battles, but money wins wars, and China knows it. Then there's the environmental backlash. Expanding airfields and military outposts means displacing communities, damaging ecosystems, and igniting protests. In places like Guam and the Philippines, locals are pushing back, questioning whether military security is worth the cost. The U.S. has the firepower, but without local support, those bases could become liabilities. So here's the real problem. What happens when military expansion clashes with diplomacy? The U.S. is racing to keep its allies close while China pulls them away. And with tensions rising, it's not a question of if this balance will break, but when. Want to stay ahead of these global power shifts? Subscribe now and turn on notifications, because what's coming next will change everything. The Pacific is caught between giants. The U.S. is reinforcing its military dominance. China is expanding its influence, and smaller nations are stuck in the middle. Some want protection from an aggressive Beijing, while others see economic opportunities too good to pass up. Not every country wants to pick a side, but how long can they stay neutral? Meanwhile, China's rise isn't just military, it's economic, political, and strategic. Beijing is weaving a web of alliances through trade deals, investments, and infrastructure projects, making some nations dependent on Chinese influence. The U.S. sees this as a direct challenge to its role as the Pacific's stabilizing force. The question is, who holds the real power, the one with the biggest navy or the one controlling the region's economy? At the same time, the U.S. is doubling down on alliances. Australia, Japan, and the Philippines are reinforcing military ties, while NATO is showing increased interest in the Pacific. But not all nations are eager for another Cold War. Many prefer to walk the tightrope between Washington and Beijing, benefiting from both without committing to either. For them, survival means staying out of the fight, but can they if tensions escalate? And here's the real dilemma. Is war inevitable, or can power be balanced without conflict? The Pacific is no longer just a region. It's the chessboard where the next great power struggle is playing out. But the pieces are still moving, and history has shown that when empires clash, Those caught in the middle rarely get to choose their fate. You just unlocked a level of knowledge most people will never have. While the world is distracted, China and the US are preparing for a battle that could reshape global power forever. Now, you know the real moves being made, the missile systems, the military strategies, the shifting alliances. But this is just the beginning. Think about it. How many other critical events are unfolding right now, hidden beneath the surface? How much insider knowledge are you missing that could change how you see global power, military strategy, and the future? The difference between those who understand the world and those who get blindsided? Access to the right information. Are you the type to stay ahead of the curve or wait until the headlines tell you what already happened? If you want to keep uncovering the hidden truths behind military power and global strategy, subscribe now and turn on notifications. Because those who know what's coming next will always be one step ahead.